Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And I would like to say welcome to everyone who took some time to come onto our webinar today. My name is Courtney. I'm from Homebase. Some of you may be familiar with our Homebase platform because a lot of the universities here in the US use our platform in order to get information, visa support, lots of community details, different things to you as a student who might be attending their university. So you may be familiar with what we do in our platform. And if not, we're going to give you some opportunities to go explore here after this webinar. But it sounds like a lot of you are here today based on the questions that you answered when you signed up because you are somewhere in the visa application process so that you can come to the US for the fall semester. And we would love to welcome you here to the US. And so we host some webinars together with ZF Visa Guides who will help explain a little bit of some of the things you need to know as a student that will help you navigate the complicated visa process and make something that seems complicated not quite so complicated. So we are joined today by Travis Feuerbacher, who will take over, and he is a past consular officer from U.S. embassies and also an immigration attorney. And I am going to turn it over to you to let you introduce yourself, Travis.
Thanks, Courtney. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you for joining us. I am currently in Taiwan, where it is already the 9th of July. It's the 8th of July, still in the United States, and probably somewhere in between for most of you. But that means that we are rapidly nearing when you really should be appearing for your interview and getting ready to travel to the United States. And so this is kind of what I would call crunch time at the moment. And so, what I want to do today is talk about the student visa interview process. And I'm going to specifically focus on a couple of the areas that you expressed concern about when you answered those questions and registered for the course. So, as Courtney alluded to, I am a US immigration attorney. Before I returned to the practice of law, I spent several years as a career US diplomat for our foreign ministry, what we call the US Department of State. And for most of my career, I worked as a visa officer where I conducted tens of thousands of visa interviews for applicants from all over the world. I've worked in Mexico, the United States, and China, and I had a brief assignment in Guatemala way back in the day. And I've talked to people from virtually every country. So now, as a US immigration lawyer, my focus is on helping applicants navigate through this complicated process. So I help with everything from complicated situations, delays, previous refusals, all the way to just, hey, I want to practice likely interview questions so that I know what to expect. And so today, I want to start with just a high-level overview of the student visa process. And like Courtney mentioned, I think most of you are probably somewhere in that process right now. So I'm not going to go in through to a lot of review. Instead, I'm going to focus on how to request an emergency interview appointment for those of you who just can't get an interview in time. And I'll also give some tips for those of you who can't find an interview at all, because unfortunately, that is a situation that more and more applicants are facing right now. Then I'm going to talk about the considerations your visa officer will go through during your interview. I'll give you an insight in how to prepare for that interaction. And if you have been refused, I will talk about a couple of tips to address prior refusals before we open it up to your questions. So let's jump into it. Although I am a lawyer, I do need to remind all of you that the point of this presentation is not for me to provide legal advice. If you have specific questions, if you face specific complications, please don't leave this process to chance. It is really important that you go into your interview and your application with strategic preparation. So if you want to reach out to me directly, I will share my contact information at the end of this presentation. Please don't rely on what you may read online because it's often not correct. So let's start with the visa process. Now, I think all of you are probably somewhere in this process. So this is a quick review just so that we can kind of set the stage for the rest of the discussion. Now, the process begins when you receive your I-20 form from your school, your university, or the institution where you're going to study. That I-20 form is the first thing that you need to start your application, which begins with an online form that we call the DS-160. That online form must be completed, must be submitted before you can schedule your visa interview. And of course, you now must schedule that interview in your home country or the country where you are a resident. So for most of you, that means the country where you're a citizen, the country that issued your passport. And unfortunately, and we'll talk about this in a moment, I do know that many countries, and India is a really good example, Nepal, Ghana, China, it's becoming more and more difficult to schedule an interview in the next couple of weeks, which may be your only choice if you want to make it to school on time. So we'll talk about what to do if you can't schedule an interview soon. Now, after your interview, your officer will need to review your social media. They're going to be looking for things like evidence that you are maybe hostile towards the United States, or that you've done something illegal, or that you violated a previous visa. It is rare for students to face complications in that process, but it is very important that you mention all of your social media platforms in your DS-160. Because if your officer finds an account that you did not mention, that alone could result in a denial. So take that very seriously. Now, after the social media review concludes and a couple of automated processes finish, then your visa should be issued and you can finally travel to the United States. And so let's talk about when you should schedule your interview, and I'll give you some tips about how to do so. So first of all, on your I-20 form, there is the program start date. In this example, it's the 14th of August, which is just over a month away. Now, this is a deadline by which you must be physically in the United States at school, ready to go. If your officer at your interview is not confident that you can travel before this date, they will likely deny your application. The regulations say that they should either deny your application or give you an opportunity to get a revised I-20 form with a later date. So the safest thing to do is plan ahead and make sure that you're giving yourself enough time so that you can interview, get your passport back, and travel on time. Now, while we're here on the I-20, I should also mention that it also shows an earliest admission date. Now, that is 30 days before the program start date. So think of this as your 30-day window in which you can enter the United States with your F1 visa. You can't come any earlier, and if you try to arrive later, you may face complications when you enter the country. So you should schedule your interview as early as possible. And I would generally say, as a rule of thumb, that you should try to schedule your interview at least 1 month before that program start date. Because if you're delayed, that delay will hopefully conclude, you can get your passport back and still travel on time. Now, what if you just can't find an interview in time? And unfortunately, I think many of you are in that situation where the earliest interview you see in the website maybe isn't until October or November or even out into 2027. If that's the case, I'm going to tell you how to request an emergency or an expedited interview appointment. Now, these instructions are generally surfaced on embassy and consulate websites. So if you want to kind of remind yourself of what to do, it's a good idea to go to the website of the embassy or consulate where you are scheduling your interview, and they will walk you through exactly how to request an emergency or an expedited interview appointment. Here's what you do. First, you have to schedule your interview at some point in the future, even if it's months beyond your program start date. Then log back into the website where you scheduled your interview. And there's two basic formats of this website, depending on where you're interviewing. In most embassies and consulates, there will be a menu on the left side of the screen that has an option for emergency interview request or emergency appointment. Click on that, and in the prompt that appears, explain when your program starts, explain that you were only able to find an interview on whatever date you did, and then respectfully request an earlier interview so that you can make it to the start of your program. And then be sure to upload your I-20 form in that request, because that will be your proof that your program starts on a certain date. Now, in some countries, you actually have to click on My Dashboard, and then you'll go to your interview, and there will be an option to request an emergency appointment there. But either format, you should be able to go through these steps. Now, every embassy and every consulate does maintain a couple of available slots every single day for emergency appointment requests. The idea is that students sometimes are in a bind like this, and so there is some bandwidth that's kept available for people in your situation. However, once those appointment slots are filled, there is nothing more the embassy or consulate can do. There's just no more availability that they can offer. And so your request may be denied. And if you've been refused before, it may be denied just because of that, because they may want to keep these available appointments open for people who haven't interviewed at all yet. So if you find that you make this request, the request is denied, my advice would be to immediately reach out to the international student team at your school and ask them what other options you might have. It may be possible for them to postpone your program start date and issue a revised I-20 form. It may also be possible to defer the start of your class, maybe until next semester or even next year. And I know that that's not the best option. I know that that would be a pretty big setback, but it may be the only thing you can do to actually schedule an appointment and make it to the United States. So first and foremost, I would recommend that you start this process immediately if you haven't done so already. Don't wait, because it may be difficult to schedule your interview. If you can't get an interview on time, go into the portal and try to request something earlier. Courtney, I see that you've got a hand raised.
I do, because I'm getting a lot of the same questions about how to do an expedited appointment. And I thought this is a good time to kind of jump in and ask these. So,
Sure.
if people have asked for an expedited appointment and they were denied, can they ask again? Or what is the process if those slots are filled and then you want to try again another day?
Really good question, and I'm glad you asked that, because I should mention this. So, if you make this request and it's denied, I would not recommend that you make another request, because you can almost guarantee it will be denied again. You also run the risk of starting to annoy the staff in the embassy or the consulate, which is not something you want to do. You want to keep these people on your good side, because they are the ones who are going to decide whether you should get a visa or not. So if your request is denied, the one thing that I would recommend that you do, and this does work from time to time, is log into the website where you schedule your interview appointment at night, early in the morning, and on the weekends. I have worked with many students who have found an interview like that. And what happens is people may cancel, they may, move their appointment that they already scheduled. And, and if that happens, additional availability will open. And so if you log in when that opening comes available, you can snag it. And so I know this is a little bit annoying, or extremely annoying, but I do recommend that you log in, periodically. Again, later at night, early in the morning, and on the weekends tends to be the best time to find additional slots. Okay, so Courtney, please jump in if there are other questions that we should answer. So with that out of the way, I want to talk about the interview itself. So I'm going to suppose that you are able to schedule an interview. I'm crossing my fingers that all of you make it through this mess that we're facing right now. When you stand in front of your visa officer, They are going to think about three factors as they try to decide whether or not they can approve your visa. Now, they may not ask you these questions directly, but this is what is going through their mind as they're trying to reach their decision. And so I want you to keep these three factors in mind as you prepare for your interview. So, number one, the officer is trying to determine if you're actually going to be a student. So, if I'm your visa officer, I'm thinking, if I give you this F1 visa, are you going to use that to travel to the United States, enroll in a full course load, attend class, and while you're attending class, do you have basic English abilities where you can understand what's being taught? And then are you going to graduate? Or do you have something else in mind? Are you just trying to get this visa so you can enter the country and maybe find a job or move in with a friend or a family member? Or maybe just travel around and enjoy yourself? And so that is a major consideration the officer is going to be thinking about. They may ask you lots of questions like, why did you choose your school? What other schools did you apply to? What did you have to do to get into this program? Did you take an English test? Did you have to take some online courses to qualify? And so I want you to be very prepared to volunteer your personal motivations. You should be able to explain how you arrived at this decision to study in the United States, to study at your specific school, and to pursue your specific major or degree. Now, consideration number two is actually much simpler. It is more of a binary yes or no. Do you have enough money to pay for your tuition and your living expenses? Now, people often ask me, how should I explain my financial arrangements? My answer is actually pretty simple. Tell me what your arrangements are. And that is how you should explain it to your officer. The officer does not want to hear some, simple arrangement. They actually want to hear what you have honestly done to make sure you can afford this program. So just be prepared to explain, if you have a sponsor, if you have a scholarship, if you're taking a student loan out, just explain the honest situation that you have arranged, and that is what the officer wants to hear. And then finally, consideration number three is what we commonly call having ties to home. What this means is because the F1 visa is a non-immigrant visa, it is kind of like a ticket that gets you into the United States, but it only allows you to remain in the country while you are a student. Once you graduate, and of course, if you complete OPT, if you choose to do so, you actually have to show, at least at the time of your interview, that you have a present intent to leave the United States. In other words, you can't just stay in the country forever. And so to show that you have ties to home, you should be prepared to explain exactly what you plan to do outside of the United States after you graduate. Plans may change. You may find that a company has offered you a job and they're going to sponsor you for a work visa in the United States. That's great. But as of the day of your interview, you have to explain what you plan to do outside of the country after your education comes to an end. And now this is important, and I think a lot of students don't understand how this whole process fits together. The way the law is written, there is a default assumption that your visa officer has to make that you are not qualified for a student visa unless you can demonstrate why you are qualified. So to put that a different way, you are only going to succeed if you can volunteer your details and your situation and tell your visa officer why they should say yes. There is a lot of misinformation floating around online where people will say, answer with only short responses. Only answer the questions your officer asks. And I'm going to tell you, I want to be very clear, that is not how you succeed at the interview. The way you succeed is by being very proactive, by volunteering your situation and focusing on these three factors to establish that you really are a student, you can afford everything, and at least presently, currently, you're intending to leave the United States after you graduate. That is how you put yourself in the best possible position for a successful outcome. Okay, now I want to talk about previous denials before we open it up to your questions. I do understand that many of you have unfortunately been denied before, and this is unfortunately kind of typical this time of year when many people have already gone to an interview and now they're trying to go back, because this is maybe your last chance before you can make it to school. I know that this can be extremely stressful, and it is a serious situation that you should prepare for strategically. So every time you appear for your visa interview, your officer is going to type notes into your digital file which explain the decision that they reached. Now, of course, if they decided to deny your application, those notes are going to be very negative. They're going to explain concerns that the officer had that led them to say no. So do not try to hide the fact that you were denied, but also don't try to explain why you were denied at your next interview. If you try to explain why you're denied, first, you might be wrong because your officer never tells you why they deny your application. All you're doing is just introducing more concerns that the next officer might think about. And I used to hear this all the time when I was a visa officer. Somebody would say something like, well, at my last interview, I was denied because my officer was worried that I couldn't afford my education. And now the first thing that went through my mind was, well, wait a minute. Now I'm concerned that you can't afford your education. So don't volunteer more negative thoughts, more concerns for your next officer. Instead, I want you to offer positive details in your DS-160 where it asks for an explanation for your previous denial. Try to summarize why your next officer should say yes so that you can, put some positive thoughts in their mind as they prepare for your interview. And then during the interview, be prepared for a question that's very common. What has changed since your last interview? Now, if anything in your life has changed, maybe you've gotten married, you've been promoted at your job, you've been accepted to a better school, I think it's easy to answer that question. But this can be very difficult if not much has changed. Maybe you're going to the same school, you have the same plans. And so it's important that you're prepared to answer that question. And it may just be, again, a summary of your qualifications. So I know that I've gone through this very quickly. I do want to give you a couple of areas where you can find additional support. And I see Moroni has joined us. He can chime in here as well. First of all, if you are looking for more insights as you prepare for your interview, you're looking for exactly how you can explain a previous refusal or how you can actually, put together all of your details in a very short interview, proactively, of course, to try to convince your officer to say yes. Well, first place I would suggest is log into the Homebase platform. And I think you will receive a link to this after the webinar. And in there, you will see some mini courses that my partner and I have put into the system. We talk about the step-by-step process to secure your visa with links to official government guidance. We have a course that talks about those factors that the officer is going to consider. We offer some tips to complete your DS-160, and we go into more detail about how to prepare for the interview itself. If you want more than that, specifically if you're really grappling with a complicated situation like a previous refusal, or you have family in the United States, or a pending green card application, for example, you can also find links from Homebase to our online expert guides. So we have comprehensive courses that cover the DS-160, how to prepare for the interview, and the complete end-to-end journey, which also includes live question and answer sessions if you still have lingering questions. So again, a good place to start is Homebase. And if you still want more, take a look at our visa guides online. And if you have specific questions, or if you just want to practice a mock interview, send us an email to info@zfvisa.com and we'll let you know how we can help. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Moroni, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Hi. Thanks everyone for coming. I think the very first step in preparing is exactly what you did. I think Travis, in coming here to the webinar, I think Travis is an incredible resource, and so I hope that was helpful. We will be sending out the resources that we discuss in an email after the webinar. We'll send out a recording of the webinar as well, and a few things really quickly. So we are always seeking more input on how we can better support international students and scholars. And so, um, Sarah, if you don't mind putting the support email for Homebase in the chat, that would be great. And one thing that we've been working on for the last few months is a visa interview prep hub. And I'll share my screen really quickly and show a little bit of what's there. So we built this with Travis and getting feedback from Travis and many other experts. And um, so there's a few things in here that we hope are helpful. So first is the assessment. So this will walk you through some of the questions that come up in the DS-160, but also things that might come up in your interview. And so questions like, do you have family currently in the US? Have you ever overstayed a visa? And then it will help you identify areas or red flags that you need to be able to address during your interview. And so this is free. Feel free to jump in and take the assessment. Here, let me put the link in the chat here. All right. And then this wait times document or interactive map is essentially displaying the data that's currently displayed on the US government website, just in not such an awful way. And so depending on which country you're at, you would have to typically come here and find the different cities within your country and then navigate correctly. Here you could just say, hey, I am in India, and um, and then it can show the wait times at different um, at the different uh, consulates. And so feel free to play around with that. So that should be available. This is updated as often as the U.S. government website is updated, and so it's not always up to date. So those dates might be a little bit off there. So we'll sync it with the government website very frequently. So there's the visa wait times, and then these other ones we just released a beta version of these, and so these are very early releases, but there are a few things. So number one is an immigration photo. And so you'll need one for your DS-160. You'll need one for your I-765 once you're in the US. You'll need one for your visa interview. And so here, this just takes a photo and it validates that it's compliant. It removes the background. And so this is just a paid tool. This one's not free, but you can use here. I'll put a code. So photo 20. That'll be 20% off of that if you wanted to use that. And then this one is brand new. So this is we haven't released this yet, but you can join the wait list. So it scans all of your the 6 major platforms of social media for content that may cause issues that you'll want to be able to address. And so this one is this one is not released. We're looking to release it here in the next week or two, and we'll let you know when it is done and ready. But this is just a review of your social media. It goes back quite a few years, and so for me, when I did it, I had some surprises. Oh yeah, I forgot that I had said that, and so that might be helpful for some. And then this is a very early release, and this will be changing and improving. But what this is it essentially takes you through the different steps of the DS-160, and it will pull your information from the documents that you upload, and it will auto complete the different portions. And then as you complete different areas, it will give you hints as to how you might want to answer different questions. And so what this does is it does a few things. So the DS-160, it does time out if you don't fill it out all in one sitting. And it is hard to share or collaborate with others if you need input. And also, sometimes you fill out the DS-160 long before you go for your interview. And so this is essentially a collaborative step-by-step process where you can work through the different components, and then you can save it as a record so that when you then go later to your visa interview, you can remember how you had responded so that your responses at your interview do not contradict what you had put in your DS-160. I'm sure Travis said this earlier, but just reiterating, you have to be familiar with what's in your DS-160. Do not have other people complete that for you. And so, yeah, those are the 5 tools that we have in our visa interview prep hub, and feel free to check those out. And please send us any feedback that you have. Like I said, these are all recently released, and so we'll have lots of improvements coming shortly. And so we'll send this out, and we'll send a link to your a link to the course that Travis mentioned. We'll send the recording, and I just want to also reiterate that we are doing whatever we can to bring as many international students and scholars to the U.S. as possible. We are grateful for what you bring to our communities. We think that you enliven our communities. You bring a new flavor and excitement, and a sense of gratitude for being here. And I'm very grateful that you are choosing to work this process to come to this country that I love so much. So with that, I will turn it over to Courtney. Are we doing Q&A?
Yes, we are. And perfect timing. I just finished organizing all the questions to try to make it make sense. So Travis, I interrupted you in the middle to ask about visa expediting and appointments, and now I have a lot more questions about expediting and appointments.
Let's
So
go.
first of all, there's just a general question about why it's so hard to get an appointment and when there might be more available appointments. And then I'm going to tie a second question into that because we have so many. And the second one is, do you have to have an appointment slot in order to expedite?
Unfortunately, you do have to have an appointment slot in order to get an earlier appointment. It's a crazy requirement, but you have to be able to schedule an appointment to request an earlier time. And I'm working with several students right now who have paid the fee. When they log into the website, there's just nothing available. And I can't imagine anything more frustrating than that. Now, I can tell you what I think is happening, but I'm not sure that it's going to make it better. I mean, it's incredibly frustrating. You've worked really hard to get to this point, and you just can't even explain your qualifications to an officer. But quickly, just for what it's worth, what is happening is that managers in consular sections, these are managers of visa officers, they're looking at making available interview slots based on kind of a mathematical equation. How many interview windows do I have? How many officers will I have on this given day? Who's going to be, leaving my post? Who's arriving? Who's going to be on holiday? And they're, calculating how many appointment slots they can make available. Now, the State Department is going through a bit of change right now. They have not been hiring new officers as quickly as they used to. They're changing the duration that some officers will remain at certain, embassies and consulates. People are resigning. There's a bit of turmoil, and I think that is part of the reason that it's harder to request interviews. But I think another part of this is for almost every type of non-immigrant visa, there are additional review requirements. Social media review is a good example. That takes more visa officer time, which means officers can conduct less interviews than they used to. So unfortunately, I don't know when this will calm down. I don't know when new slots will be available. The best advice I can give you is to check in often and I'm going to be crossing my fingers over here that you can find something. But like I said earlier, it is a good idea to stay in touch with the international student team at your school. You are not going to be the first person, or unfortunately the last, that faces this situation this year. And I'm hopeful that they will have some alternative arrangements that they can make available to you. So don't hesitate to reach out. Those teams are here for you, they're here to help you.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add on to that as well is also take a moment to just understand what the international team at the university can and cannot do. So, what the university has control over is your admission to the university. They understand the program start dates of your program, and they'll be able to tell you if it's okay to arrive late. They can also tell you if you can defer that admission to another term, and they would be able to adjust your I-20 dates. What they can't do is they do not have any special connection to the US Embassy or consulate. And so I can tell you every university would love to have that connection and be able to make that appointment for you. But it's also important when you're reaching out to the university, just understand what they're able to do because they'll be able to help you much easier if you ask them the right questions. Okay, I have other sort of specific questions here about the emergency appointment. So, what if you don't have a link to schedule an emergency appointment and you can't figure out how to request an emergency or expedited appointment? Where do you look?
So there are each embassy and consulate uses a private company to manage their appointment scheduling system. And there are generally two different companies or two different websites that embassies and consulates around the world use. So it's very likely you'll find that you're in one of two situations. For most countries, there is a menu bar on the left side of the screen after you log into that website, and there should be an option that says either emergency appointment or expedited appointment. Now, that will only appear after you've scheduled an interview at some point. You have to have a specific interview date, and then you should see that option. Now, for other countries, and an example is France uses this other system, you actually have to log into your website, and then you have to click on your actual interview. If I remember correctly, I think you have to first click on My Dashboard. You'll scroll down and see a little kind of rectangle that shows your interview confirmation, or the date that you're interviewing, the type of visa you're seeking. And below that, there should be a button that says, I think it says emergency interview request or emergency request. Click on that. You'll have to click OK, yes, I'm requesting an earlier interview. And then you'll go through the same process where you type in a short explanation, you upload your I-20 form, and you submit it. Now, unfortunately, that system is very clunky. There's no way to see any confirmation that you've made the request. There's no way to review your request, but rest assured that your request will go in. And no matter which system the embassy or consulate uses, you should get a response within a matter of a few days. They're very quick to respond. Hopefully that request is approved, but the later we get into the northern hemisphere summer months here, the less likely it will be approved because you will be in a situation where there's just nothing else to make available. And I will also say, people have been asking me, is there anything else we can do? Can we get a member of Congress involved, or somebody to put pressure on the embassy? And I will tell you, I've gotten Congress involved with the embassy in New Delhi in India. And the response was simply, we cannot make an earlier appointment available. And that leads me to conclude that they just don't have any more availability to offer. It's a really unfortunate situation, which is why I say be in constant contact with your international student team. And you may want to start exploring, kind of your plan B.
Okay, all amazing advice. Okay, so if you're trying to log in and you're trying to make that initial appointment so that you can request an expedited appointment, but you don't see anything available, I know you mentioned this once, but again, what can you do to try to find an appointment?
Log in often. it's very strange how the system works, but as people cancel or reschedule interviews, new availability will show up. What I've heard from my clients is that they have the best success rate when they log in late at night, early in the morning, or on the weekends, which I think is when fewer people are accessing the system. But honestly, anytime you have a few minutes free, log into that website and just take a look. You may find that there's something that is available.
Yeah, and I'll say I have students as well who they set an alarm, and I personally would find this absolute torture, but they set an alarm for 1 a.m. every single day. They wake up, they log in, they look and see if any appointments are available, and they've had a lot of success that way. I realize that's not the ideal situation, and that's not what we necessarily want to tell you is the answer, but that is what tends to work because not everyone is logging in at that time. So if someone cancels, if something opens up, it's more likely that you're going to find a slot in the middle of the night.
It is crazy that, Courtney, that we're sitting here recommending this. I mean, this is not lost on us. This is a completely unfair, unreasonable situation. But look, this is what we found is working, and so we're doing our best to give you some thoughts.
Yes, I would not want to recommend this to you. It's just the reality. Oh, it's crazy. Okay, so there's a lot of questions about what's a reasonable amount of time before program start date to have your visa appointment. So it sounds like people have heard that you have to have a visa interview at least a month before your program starts, um, or some people have it a week before. Others are really just the day before their classes are set to start. At what point do you need to consider a expedited or emergency appointment request so that it does not impact the possibility of getting a visa?
So ideally, my general rule of something you should strive for is at least 1 month before the program start date. Then you've got a much better chance of getting your visa, even if you're subjected to a short delay and you can still travel. But look, I totally understand that that's not even in the realm of possibility for many of you. So I think it's safest to at least give yourself a week between your interview and your program start date. Because, like I said, there are a couple of automated processes and manual processes that must conclude after your interview. And your passport is going to have to make it back to you. Every embassy and consulate uses a slightly different system. Some will use a pickup process, some will use a courier, but that could take another few days. And so I think if you're looking at less than a week, you are now putting yourself at risk. Certainly, the day before your classes begin, your officer is going to look at your I-20 form, and the first thing they're going to think is, there's no way. I mean, this is a physical impossibility. It would be like me saying, I need to make it from Taipei to Paris in an hour. It just doesn't work. And so I think my kind of drop dead date or deadline that I would impose upon myself is a week. And if you're finding that, it's shorter than that, you definitely should be considering a request for an emergency interview. And, you may want to start thinking about alternatives. And look, every situation is different. This is where I can't give you a blanket recommendation. I can't say, don't go to your interview if it's less than a week. In some, nuanced situations, that may still work out. So this is where I would say, feel free to send me an email. We will connect, talk about your individual situation, and I'll make a specific recommendation for you. But as a general rule, I would say at least a week as the bare minimum.
I think that's great advice. And I would also say, just from having worked with international students at the university for a long time, it's also much easier to be successful in your classes if you don't arrive late. It can be
Yeah.
really hard to do well and adjust and move into your apartment and everything if you're going to be there late. And so, if you have the chance to move your program start date maybe to the fall semester to spring, it's not always a bad option because it allows you to be successful in the program and get your visa, book a plane ticket when you know you're going to be able to go all of the different pieces. But it's again really important when you talk to your international office, if you have these questions come up, just understand what they're able to do and then also what they're not able to accommodate.
Yeah, Courtney, there is a saying that the three biggest stressors in life are getting married, starting a new job, and moving. You're all about to embark on basically two of those three things. And you're not starting a new job, but you kind of are. You're starting an educational program and you're moving to a foreign country, a place you may have never even been before. This is a big deal. Jet lag is a big deal, if nothing else. So I totally agree. I mean, I know it's not the greatest situation to be facing a deferral, but that might actually work out in your favor if that's what you have to do.
Yeah. Okay, so I have something in here, and I've heard this as well, that you could get an ASC appointment before your visa interview to get your fingerprints and photo taken, and then you don't have to bring a picture to the appointment. Is this true, and is this a good idea?
So some countries have a separate appointment for what we call biometrics. It's where you go to a different place, your fingerprints are taken, and then you go to your visa interview on a different date. India is a country that does this. Now, let me talk about the photo quickly because Moroni just introduced a really powerful tool that Homebase offers for photos. When you fill out your DS-160, you have to upload a passport photo. Now, the reason you have to do that is because the State Department is running that through an automated check to see if you may have applied for a visa or even a passport under a different identity. It's a fraud prevention tool, essentially. And so if your photo is not high enough quality or it could fail for a number of reasons, it could just be a glitch in the system, then when you arrive for your visa interview or for your biometric appointment, the staff that greets you may say, "Oh, your photo isn't sufficient. Do you have a physical photo with you?" And they will scan that and run it through their system. So it's a good chance that if you go to your initial biometric appointment first and you give them your photo there, you're done. However, there's still a chance that that photo has failed. The scan they took of it was bad, or who knows. And so you may still be asked for a copy of your photo at your actual interview. So the safest thing to do is keep a physical passport photo with you at all times in case they ask for it, because if they ask for it and you don't have it, now you're going to be delayed.
Okay, great tips. I have a lot of denial questions here, and so I try to kind of put them all together in one section. So it sounds like a lot of people are being denied for 214B, which is pretty common reason to be denied. If you're denied for that, how can you know what the reason is for the denial, or how can you get an idea of it? I know you and I have done a few of these webinars, and you have some great tips about what to do immediately after the interview and how to kind of think back. I know you said don't try to explain yourself when you get in there, assuming you know the answer as to why you got a denial. But what can you do if you got the denial and you're thinking back? What is the strategy here?
So first of all, let me mention what 214B is. 214B is a reference to a specific law. It's part of the Immigration and Nationality Act. And what it basically says, and I'm going to paraphrase here, is that you do not qualify for a visa unless you can establish that you are qualified for a visa. So in other words, you're kind of guilty until you prove you're innocent, which is a very strange situation in the United States. But what 214B also says is that if you are denied, all that means is that at that interview, at that moment in time, you simply did not convince your officer to say yes. But at any subsequent interview, at any time, it could be the next day or a year from now, your next officer is completely within their rights to approve your application if they are convinced. So think of 214B as just a momentary one-time setback. It is not any sort of permanent punishment on your file. However, as I mentioned earlier, every time you appear for an interview, your officer is taking notes, and those notes are visible to future officers. So there will be kind of immediate concerns raised before they ask you the first question. So you do need to be strategically prepared to kind of address that. Now, how do you address it? Well, first of all, your officer will not give you a specific reason for the denial. It's super frustrating, but it's by design. It's because if an officer tells you, look, I have concerns about your financial arrangements, you may just go back. I'm not saying you would, but you could go back and then, doctor some fake bank statements and then say, look, I have enough money. So the idea here is to protect the integrity of the process. The officer will not tell you why they've denied you. And that's specifically why I do not recommend that you try to explain why you were denied. You really genuinely will not know. You may be introducing new concerns unnecessarily. You may be completely wrong. You may be right, but you won't know. So the best thing you can do is as soon as you leave your interview, type up or write down a transcript of that interaction. Write the questions your officer asked you and the responses that you gave. Put yourself in the officer's shoes and ask yourself, did this person explain their situation clearly? Did they give enough context for the officer to conclude that they really are a student, they can afford everything, and they're going to leave the United States after they graduate? And if you think that there's an area where you could add more detail, that's a good place to focus as you prepare for your next interview. And I will also say this is a prime opportunity to reach out to us. This is what we do every single day. We evaluate previous interviews, we help applicants pinpoint where they went wrong, and then we help them prepare for the next attempt. So if you want our support, reach out to us. You can also start by the courses in Homebase and look at our online guidance as well. We spend a lot of energy talking about how to kind of overcome a previous denial.
Great. And Travis, I think this is one of the best tips that you give. I mean, you have many good tips, but writing down what you had, what interview questions you did, whether you end up with an approval or a denial, it's a great history for you to have so that you know exactly how the interview went. And, we work with ZF Visa Guides and Travis because they really are experts in the field. And so if you find that you've run into a question, they're a really great resource to go to say, here's what was asked of me, here's what I took with me. What do I need to do to go back? It didn't work out the first time. Or if you have any concerns, even better, do it before you ever go to the interview so that you don't have to have a denial that you then need to overcome.
Yeah, I would love for you to be prepared before your first attempt, because if you can avoid a denial altogether, you're in a much better situation. Absolutely, Courtney.
Yeah, preparation. And that's why we do these, because we want you to be prepared before you go, hopefully not after the denial. But it doesn't mean the end if you got a denial. There's still plenty of students that I've worked with over the years that have gotten a visa, a second or third appointment.
And by the way, I don't want to give anybody false hope here, but when I worked in Beijing in China, I approved an applicant who had been refused 9 times before. Now, that was definitely an edge case. It's not something that happened all the time. But just 2 weeks ago, or maybe last week, I can't remember, I helped an applicant find an approval after they had been refused 5 times. So this does happen, and it still happens. It is not super common. I don't want to give you false hope again, but with the right preparation, you may still find success. So again, do feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help you.
So I have a couple other questions here, which I think are great concerns and questions. If you already have a B1, B2 visa and you're applying for an F1 and you get denied, the first question is, does it impact that? And the next similar question is, if you've been denied for a visitor visa in the past, does that negatively impact your F1 visa application?
So yes to both of those. First of all, if you have been denied for any visa, whatever kind of visa it was, it will be visible at a future interview, and it may, present some concerns. Now, I think if you were denied for a different type of visa in the past, like a tourist visa, it's less of a concern because now your situation is totally different. Now you're planning to go and study, a very specific purpose. But you still need to be ready to address that previous situation, just like we talked about. Now, if you have a valid visa and you're denied for a student visa, it's actually pretty common that your officer will cancel your other visa as well. The idea would be if you're not qualified for a student visa, you're also not qualified for a tourist visa. Seems incredibly unfair, but it is common. If they did not cancel your tourist visa, you can still travel on it, probably. But I would be very careful. I think a lot of people would say, oh, I'll just enter the United States as a tourist and I'll change my status to a student once I enter the country. That is incredibly risky. Please talk to an immigration lawyer before you make that decision.
That is a great tip. Yeah, just do not just assume that that is going to work out for you, because you can't study on a visitor visa.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to shift gears just a little bit of what kinds of things you might want to share. So I have a couple people who maybe don't necessarily have anything extraordinary to share about why they chose the university that they chose, but they have a
Mm.
reason for going there and it's what they prefer. Or maybe they just applied to a single university and that's where they were admitted and they intend to go. And they're a little bit concerned that they don't have the right story to go along with a successful visa appointment. What could they do to prepare for the visa interview in this case?
First of all, this is a prime opportunity to take a look at our online guidance. Go into the Homebase platform and look at our interview preparation course because we talk a lot about this. And I'll tell you, when I was a visa officer, I would often ask the question, why did you choose, Travis University? The answer I got was often extremely vague. It sounded like a Google search result. And strangely enough, when I worked in Beijing, I would get the exact same answer. And it went like this. The school has many good professors and it has many beautiful trees. I always thought that was strange. It was very clear that a visa agent had given applicants a script and said, say this at your interview and you will be approved. Trust me, that is not the way to be approved. And so here's what I would recommend. First of all, don't ask yourself, what does my officer want to hear? Instead, think about why you genuinely chose this school, why you applied to this school as, amongst many schools or the only school. And I want you to be very personal. I'm sure part of it is maybe the ranking of the school or a specific program the school offers, but it's got to be more than that. You're making a huge decision to move to a foreign country, spend a significant portion of your time and money to pursue this degree. And so I want you to dig way down and be very personal to explain exactly why you arrived at this decision. And this is something that we cover extensively in our online course. I do recommend that you take a look at that because this is a critical kind of pivotal point in most interviews. If somebody cannot give a personal explanation for why they have chosen this path, that right there is where many students face denial. So take this seriously. And again, it's not what your officer wants to hear. It's what you have personally gone through as you reach this decision.
Yeah, that is a fabulous tip. And I mean, it's very easy to learn more about the university that you're going to. So if you only applied to one, log on to their website, check the weather, look and see what the environment looks like around you, the houses, what's the international student community like? What kind of events do they do? Those are all things that you might see and connect with, and it will help you to understand even why you chose to go there.
And think about beyond that. What are you going to be doing on the weekends? What will you do in the evenings? What kind of hobbies do you have? And will you be able to engage in those hobbies while you're there? I've talked to people who are avid rowers and they're excited because their campus is next to a river where they can go and row in the mornings. Some people may be excited that they can take a trip on the weekends to New York City and experience the vibrant culture there. This is a very individual, nuanced situation that is unique to each of you. But this is what you should be doing. You should be really thinking about what is my life going to be like and explain why this is what you've chosen.
So I know we're coming up on time here, but There's also a few questions on here about social media accounts. And what if you forgot to put one on the DS-160 when you submitted it? Or what if you forgot other information on the DS-160 and you need to change some of it? And so I think this is so important because this is not an unusual situation at all. And it's not the easiest, most intuitive thing to change. So if your first DS-160 that you submitted is lacking something, missing something, what do you do?
So first of all, you cannot change your DS-160 after you submit it. It's a very strange process, but your answers are locked in place after you submit the form. So if you find that you made a mistake, the first thing you actually should do is reach out to an immigration lawyer because you may find that the mistake that you found is not important enough to take any further action. Maybe you can just explain it at your interview. But if you find that it is an important issue, the only thing you can do is submit a new DS-160 form. Now, I recommend that you do this as early as possible because then what you have to do is go back to the website where you scheduled your interview and use the tool to reach out to the embassy or consulate. It's usually called submit feedback, which is very confusing. But reach out to the embassy or consulate and alert them that you have uploaded a new DS-160 and tell them what your application ID number is. Now, if you make this request at least 7 or 10 days before your interview, they should update your profile once. They may not do it more than once, but then when you arrive at the embassy, your officer will only see the responses in the new form. Now, if you wait too long and your interview is very soon, they may not agree to update your profile with the new application ID number, and then you might be out of luck and your old DS-160 is visible. So again, this is where I would say reach out to an immigration lawyer. They would need to evaluate your situation, first decide if the mistake was important enough to take additional action, and if so, they can make some specific recommendations on your situation.
Okay, and I know there's many good questions in here. And again, you have the information to reach out directly to Travis and his team. Travis, we have two more questions. One, I'm going to ask you for your last final three tips. But before that, there's a good question here that's just kind of logistically, what does the timeline look like? You go to your appointment, you have the interview, and then what logistically happens next, and how many days does it take, and when do you get paperwork back? When do they tell you all of those things?
So this completely depends upon your unique situation and the the embassy or consulate where you applied. So if everything goes as streamlined as possible, after your interview, your officer will review your social media. A couple of automated checks conclude. Your visa is going to be printed, put inside your passport, and then your passport will be returned to you. That can happen in as few as a couple of days. It may take more like a week. Again, it very much depends on where you interviewed. Now, in some situations, your officer will need more time, or maybe they need to review some documents, or maybe they're just trying to, understand a complicated situation, or maybe they're worried that you are committing fraud and they're going to have the fraud investigation team look into your application. If any of those situations occur, you will be placed under what's called administrative processing, which is basically a temporary denial while the officer reviews more details or documents, or a fraud investigation is conducted. If you are placed under administrative processing, I would recommend that you reach out to us as soon as possible because we can evaluate the situation, and in some cases there's a short window of opportunity where we can provide more context to the embassy or consulate and help address a concern or a point of confusion to push your application forward. But again, every case is different, and so we would need to connect with you one-on-one to evaluate.
Okay, and I have one more question, even though I said that was the last one. This is another kind of logistical question, but what are you supposed to take with you to your interview?
So The short answer is look at the guidance on the State Department's website. I will see if I can find that quickly while I answer your question. But you will need, some basic documents: your passport photo, your DS-160 confirmation sheet. I don't know if I said your I-20 form, your CVIS payment receipt, which is also called the I-901. And then I would also recommend that you bring some documents to support your financial arrangements. Now, in some situations, you may want to bring more, but of course, that is uniquely dependent upon your individual situation. So I'm going to put a link to the State Department's official guidance here. I think I just found it. Yes. And this has kind of an initial checklist of documents you should bring. But of course, we talk more about that in the Homebase platform and in our online courses as well.
Okay, fantastic. And yes, it's all listed in your courses and there's links. I also see some questions in the chat just generally about how you can access this information. So everyone that signed up to attend the webinar, we'll send a follow-up email with the contact information for Travis, as well as links to all the courses that he's mentioned and the Homebase resources as well. So watch your email. That should probably come in tomorrow afternoon sometime, my time, probably middle of the night, your time. So Travis, just to wrap up, the final question here is looking back at today and kind of where everyone is trying to get here for the fall, what would be your top 3 takeaways from today's webinar?
All right. So first of all, start the process as early as you can. And it may be too late to even give that advice. But as you're seeing, it can be really difficult to schedule interviews. There's delays every step of the way. So don't waste any time. Start this process early. Number 2, and I think this is the most important tip I can give, is just be honest and be yourself. Your visa officer doesn't want to hear a specific response. They want to hear the honest response. This process is really more about a test of your credibility and your trustworthiness than anything else. Everybody has a situation that maybe they're not proud of. It's better to be honest and transparent than to try to tell an officer what you think they want to hear. So be honest. And the last thing I will say is be authentic. And I've said this a couple of times. You are going to be expected to explain why you've made these choices, why you're going to the United States, why you're going to this school, why you're pursuing this degree or this major. Be authentic when you explain your motivations. Think about why you honestly made this decision and be prepared to explain that. And I really want to wish you all the best. I know this is stressful. It's stressful for everybody. And I think that with the right preparation, with the right understanding of how this works, you really should be in a good position for success. We're here for you, though. Reach out to us. Take a look at our information on the Homebase platform. Send me an email. I know Courtney and I and Moreau and I are crossing our fingers that you are successful. And I just want to wish you good luck.
Hey, thank you everyone for taking the time to attend today. We look forward to receiving your questions, having you log into our platform, hoping to get to know you a little bit better on our community in there. And as Travis said, we are very much looking forward to as many approvals here as we can. So thank you all for your time. Thank you, Travis, for your presentation. It was very appreciated.